Hello and welcome to the Stack Exchange, where we cast our thoughts and let our arguments resolve. My name is Tristan.
And I'm Tyler.
Today we've got another video with suggestions for alternate commanders for the top 100 EDHREC commanders.
Today we're going to be covering the rank 11 through 15, at least at the time of when we compiled this list. The EDHREC top 10 is always shifting, so this may not be the same when you are watching that video. If you look at the top right of the screen, the left number is what number of commander this is, and the right number is what is the current ranking as of the recording of this video.
All right, let's just get right into it with the first commander. Miirym, Sentinel Wyrm, is a 3 and teamer dragon spirit with 6 power, 6 toughness that has flying, ward 2, and the incredible ability of whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. Oh man, I don't even know what to say. There is probably, besides Dragon, not a better generically good dragon commander than this one. This one is just absolutely insane. It's everything you'd want. Doesn't even punish you for running the legendary dragons. With all of that being said, Tyler, what do you have that could possibly match this commander?
Yeah, this commander is insane. So I wanted to kind of lean into that token generation idea, and I chose Ghired. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but Mirror of the Wilds. He costs Naya. He's a 3/3 human shaman with haste, and non-token creatures you control have tap, create a token that's a copy of target token you control that entered the battlefield this turn. So this is all about tapping down your other actual creatures to make more tokens. The way I would usually build this probably is to find a way to generate some really good or large tokens, and then run a bunch of little, probably mana dorks or haste-based little creatures that you can then tap to make more copies of those large tokens.
Honestly, I feel like that's a really cool idea. I mean, you can just build the board state as you go, play someone, and then tap to make copies of it. The next thing you play, you can tap to make copies of it if it's even bigger or better. And I think red and green also, maybe white as well. All of these colors really do give you access to those tiny hasty guys, especially red with some of those little goblins. So I think this would be a cool deck to see.
All right, Tristan, what alternative commander did you pick?
Yeah, the commander I picked to replace Miirym is Vrondis, Rage of the Ancients. He is a 3 and Gruul for a 5/4 Dragon Barbarian with Enrage. Whenever Vrondis, Rage of the Ancients, is dealt damage, you may create a 5/4 red and green Dragon Spirit creature token with, when this creature deals damage, sacrifice it. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, you may have Vrondis deal 1 damage to itself. Already you're in good burn colors, so you can just be dealing damage to yourself to be creating this huge board state. Like I mentioned in the last video, I think that restrictions really do breed creativity, and I think a card like this really gives more agency to the pilot of the deck. It kind of gives you the decision of, do I want to swing this 5/4 dragon in that will have to sacrifice itself, or do I want to hold them back? Is it better to build up a giant board state and then swing in for an alpha strike, or go in with a little chip damage so you're not risking losing all of those creatures you've built up over the turns? I just think there's a lot of cool ways you could do this. Tyler and I were even discussing a few infinite combos you can use to get infinite creature tokens onto the battlefield. We'll let you discover those for yourself, but it's a cool commander.
Yeah, I think Vrondis is a really cool commander, and I thought about building a deck for him. I think it's a very interesting card, and it feels like it kind of embodies the spirit of Miirym with making all those dragon tokens. All right, let's move on to the next commander, which is Giada, Font of Hope. Giada's a 1 and a white 2/2 angel with flying, vigilance, and each other angel you control enters the battlefield with a additional 1/1 counter on it for each angel you already control, as well as being a mana dork for only angels. So Tristan, what commander did you pick for Giada?
Yeah, so the commander that I chose to replace Giada is Sephara, Sky's Blade. Sephara Sky's Blade is a 4 and 3 white commander that has 7 power and 7 toughness and is an angel with the ability to have you pay 1 white and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying rather than pay this spell's mana cost. It also has flying and lifelink and gives all creatures on your board with flying indestructible. I think that this is just gives you a direction to go in without restricting you to angels. Angels are obviously good. This is an angel. It has flying and lifelink. They will probably have flying as well. So you can throw out a ton of angels and then tap to put this onto the battlefield as a little bit of a protection spell, while also not being afraid to swing in your angels into someone else's big board state. Overall, I think that just giving you a broader horizon, more cards to work off of than just angels, will work a lot better if you're trying to do something a little more creative with the deck. Everyone knows what a Giada deck is. It's just a bunch of angels. We've all seen them. You're going to be like, why can that card even do that? This deck can feel similar while also letting you play some of the smaller flying creatures to be able to profit more off of that tap ability to get her out early, rather than having to pay for the high-costed angels.
Dude, this card is way crazier than I originally thought, because that first ability allows her to avoid commander tax, so you can pay 1 and tap 4 untapped flyers to always get her out, no matter how many times she's been removed. On top of that, you're paying 1 and tapping 4 creatures to cheat out something that gives what will most likely be all of your creatures indestructible, as well being a 7/7 flying lifelink blocker. This is just going to be a flyers deck, and I know that if you sit down at most casual tables, they won't know what to do with you. Since your deck is just all flyers, they won't know how to block you. I can see this deck being like super, super good, especially in the lower brackets. All right, moving on to my alternative commander for Giada. My alternative pick is Lyra Dawnbringer. Lyra is a 5/5 angel with flying, first strike, and lifelink, and other angels you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. So Lyra's basically a keyword soup, and then give your other angels +1/+1 and lifelink. Not as powerful as Giada's, which gives a counter for each other angel you control, but I think the just general static buff plus the lifelink can be pretty decent, especially with all of the lifelink synergy with angels. So I think she's not a bad angels option, as well as the fact that she's a 5/5 flyer with first strike makes her really good at blocking and attacking.
Yeah, I think that 5 costs for a 5/5 with all those keywords, as well as buffing up your board and giving them lifelink, is really strong. I think I've talked about this a lot before. I just think lifelink in general is something that bracket 2 and bracket 3 decks struggle to go up against. So just getting your entire board lifelink, your entire board of angels lifelink, if they don't already have it, is going to be strong. So I like it. Moving on to the next commander, we have Jodah the Unifier. Jodah the Unifier is a Wooburg 5/5 human wizard with the following abilities. Legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control, and whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically, it just has legendary creature cascade, as well as buffing up your board in every single color. It's just super generically good. Just throw every commander of all time in this deck, and you'll have a deck that runs. So, Ty, what did you pick to do a different take on this commander?
The commander I picked to be an alternative to Jodah the Unifier is Maelstrom Wanderer. Maelstrom Wanderer is 5 and Teamer, a 7/5 elemental with creatures you control have haste, and then cascade. I think to make the deck a little more interesting, not having like repeatable cascade in the command zone feels a little better. Jodah, you get to cascade off of every legendary. With Maelstrom Wanderer, you just get the initial first big cascade, and then other than that, they just give haste. Sure, you would probably want to build this deck into some more like cascade synergies, but you're not really held to that. You could really just use them as a big creature that gives your other creatures haste, as well as a way to cheat out some big spells. It could just be the upper end of your curve for a deck, where you kind of use it as sort of a finisher after making a bunch of tokens or building a board state, one turn you can play your commander, give them all haste, and grab some extra stuff with that cascade. I think there's a lot of different things you can do with Maelstrom Wanderer, and it is a bit overpriced for what I usually like, but the fact that it is in green helps a lot with its expensive price.
Yeah, also I think to help with this cost cascade, Cascade basically just gives you 3 spells for the price of 1. Even though it's an 8 cost spell, you're generally going to be getting more value off of this. And if you hit a big creature, it can just swing instantly, activate any abilities. I really like this. And then the commander I chose to replace Jodah is Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. Rashmi is a 2 and Simic 2/3 Elf Druid with the following ability. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. You may cast it without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with lesser mana value. If you don't cast it, put it into your hand. At the very base level, you're just getting a draw every single turn off of your commander. And also, it's each turn, so you could just be playing Simic instant speed stuff and then be drawing a card. The downside is you have to reveal it, but it's not really that big of a downside to be drawing a card every single turn. Another really cool thing you can do is just set up top deck manipulation and know exactly what you're going to hit. Blue already has a ton of access to that. Green has good access to some scry abilities. Not to mention any of the tutor to the top of the library tutors that green and blue both kind of have access to. Obviously, Worldly Tutor is one you can just throw in there, tutor the creature you need to the top, and then cast it without paying its mana cost off of another creature. This might be a little too complicated, but you could play the card Momir Vig, which is a commander that I've actually built, and use Rashmi in the 99 of it to basically have perfect cascade every single time, where if you cast a green spell, Momir allows you to tutor for any creature and put it to top. So the way that you can stack this is you can stack Momir's cast trigger and then stack Rashmi's to resolve after it. So you're going to go tutor for the exact card that will be perfectly cascaded into off the card you just cast, flip it, and put it onto the battlefield. I just think it's a pretty fun card and does the cascading thing once each turn without being too powerful.
Yeah, I really like Rashmi. I like that whole ability to manipulate the top deck, and in the worst case, you're getting an extra draw each turn that you have to reveal, which isn't the worst downside for getting an extra card possibly every single turn. So this could be 4 extra cards a turn cycle or up to 4 extra free spells a turn cycle. There's just a lot you can do with it, and I think it could be a very interesting deck to see. All right, moving on to our next commander, we have Nekusar the Mindrazer. Nekusar is 2 and Grixis for a 2/4 zombie wizard, with at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar the Mindrazer deals 1 damage to that player. Alrighty, Tristan, what alternative commander do you have for Nekusar?
Okay, the alternate commander I chose for Nekusar is Sig River Cutthroat. Did I hear drawing a card? Sig. Did I hear dealing damage? Sig. They all do the same thing, but maybe a little differently. Let me kind of explain my thinking here. 1, I just love Sig. I think he's a very, very underrated value commander. He's almost always going to come out on turn 2 thanks to the hybrid mana. You can draw up to 3 extra cards a turn cycle by dealing 3 damage. And also, the damage isn't built into him, which I actually prefer. I built my own Nekusar deck, and I think he is the perfect example of a monolith or lightning rod commander, where when he comes down, you can just remove him and stop the entire game plan of the Nekusar player. Because otherwise, allowing people to draw into cards, which is what the 99 of a Nekusar deck is going to do, is just generically bad. You don't want other people to be drawing cards. And instead, Sig allows you to deal damage to someone and only you get to draw a card. There's also a lot to be said about having a commander with a very simple ability that can fly under the radar. I think that a lot of people will just ignore Sig. He doesn't feel very fun to remove because you're still going to have the things dealing damage out there. So why not focus on the things dealing damage, whereas Sig is going to sit back and maybe draw you a card every turn. Whereas in reality, this is such a powerful effect. Being able to draw a card almost every single turn cycle, if you build it right, is super cool. I recommend building Sig, and I recommend doing it in a different way than just small unblockable creatures. Check out Trinket Mage's video on it. I also have a deck list I will link below.
I think Sig is such a cool and, like you said, underrated commander. I think the greatest tragedy of Sig is the fact that he's not Grixis. There's so much stuff in Red and Grixis that does exactly 3 life loss. And I know when we were talking about while you were building this deck, it is really hard to find anything that does that 3 in Dimir. It's usually 2 damage, and you don't usually want to risk that when you're trying to do this every single turn. So that is the greatest tragedy of Sig, but like Tristan said, super underrated commander, flies under the radar a lot, and there's so much more you can do with Sig than what most people do, which is just unblockable little guys. All right, moving on to my alternative commander for Nekusar, I chose Mogis, God of Slaughter. Mogis is 2 and Rakdos for a 7/5 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible, and as long as your devotion to black and red is less than 7, Mogis isn't a creature. And then he has the ability at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Mogis deals 2 damage to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. I feel like Mogis kind of fits the same thing with Nekusar about the pinging people whenever they draw. I mean, Nekusar without any extra support or draws is dealing 2 damage to everyone at the beginning of their upkeep. And I think Mogis kind of is a bit more interesting with the fact that it kind of leans into this where people are given a choice. You're giving your opponents the choice of whether they want to take 2 damage or lose a creature. And with certain decks, this can be really interesting. It doesn't play as well into something like a tokens deck because they can just sacrifice a bunch of their creature tokens. But in a deck where you're doing maybe Voltron or Big Stompy, this can be so much more impactful. I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in Rakdos with this sacrifice or deal damage. I haven't looked too much into how to build it, but I think there's lots of options you can go with.
Yeah, personally, the biggest thing I look for in a commander deck recently has been giving choices to other players, maybe where none of them feel good. Still, giving them a choice makes for a much more interesting play pattern and overall game when you're playing down and shuffling up with other people. So I like that idea. All right, moving on into our last commander of the day. What we have in slot 15 is Isshin, 2 heavens as 1. He is a Mardu commander, a 3/4 human samurai that has a very simple ability. If a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I'm pretty sure everyone has seen some sort of take on this commander. I think the double triggering abilities is one of the most boring mechanics in the game, but I know that it's generically powerful and can have a lot of draw. So Tyler, what have you chosen to replace Isshin?
My replacement for Isshin is Delny Streetwise Lookout. Delny is a 2 and a white 2/2 human scout with creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, and if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is kind of more of a restrictive version of Isshin. Isshin's got Mardu, while Delny is mono white, and it only doubles the triggers of power 2 or less creatures. It also gives them a bit of evasiveness in white. So it's all about the different abilities off of your small little creatures, which I find to be very interesting, especially with stuff like Welcoming Vampire effects, which will draw you a card off of the little guys entering. This can do the same thing. I think it's a bit more interesting to restrict yourself just to the mono white color, as well as restricting you to power 2 or less.
While I think that Delny does offer a little bit more restriction in the power 2 or less in mono white, it's just any single ability. It's not just an attacking ability, which is really cool. So if you have something like an Esper Sentinel trigger, you get to put that on the stack twice. You pretty much already mentioned that with Welcoming Vampire, but I just never realized quite how powerful that is until, I saw someone doubling up on Esper Sentinel triggers for multiple times in a turn cycle. I think that's interesting. Okay, the commander I chose to replace Isshin is Megatron Tyrant. He is a 3 and Mardu robot with 7 power and 5 toughness for more than meets the eye ability, where you can play 1 in Mardu to cast him converted. And also, your opponents can't cast spells during combat, as well as giving you the ability at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, converting Megatron, and if you do, add 1 colorless mana for each 1 life your opponent has lost this turn. And the backside of Megatron is Megatron Destructive Force, which is a 4/5 vehicle with living metal, so you don't need to crew it, and whenever Megatron attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact. When you do, Megatron deals damage equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value to target creature. If excess damage would be dealt to that creature this way, instead, that damage is dealt to that creature's controller, and then you convert Megatron back to its front side. I think that it just offers something more unique. It's not as generic, but you're still going to want to be doing combat stuff where you're going to combat, dealing damage to people. You can even do some burn stuff to make them lose life. Black has a lot of life loss stuff in there as well. And then it feeds you the colorless mana to play the huge artifacts to then sacrifice to do a ton of damage. You have removal for creatures stapled onto it. I just think it would be kind of interesting to see. It's a 6 mana commander. I guess you can cast it for 4 mana too, which isn't that bad. But I don't see this card as much as I would like to. I just want to see someone build it. Honestly, that's why I picked it. So that wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed some of the selections we made. Maybe it gave you a little bit of inspiration. If you disagree with anything or have suggestions for other commanders, feel free to throw that in the comment section down below.
Once again, look forward to seeing more episodes in this series. And if you liked this video, or if you'd like to see any other types of videos on this channel, feel free to leave those down in the comments so we know what you want.
As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Check out some of our other content and click the link down below to support us on Patreon. We'll see you guys in the next one.